Is Daf Peches. We're at the bottom of Pei Zayin Amid Beis, and once we brought the pasuk from Hosea to explain the idea of that sometimes a woman is more likely to be running home to her parents, and therefore the assumption is that, or the default is that she's associated with her father's Korban Pesach. We went to explain some of the nevuah of Hosea and the concepts of Golus. Now we're going to continue with that idea. So Tana Devei Rabbi Chia, this is about 10 lines from the bottom of Pei Zayin Amid Beis 87b. Tana Rabbi Chia taught, what is the meaning when it says in the pasuk Elohim Haven Darka V'hu Yadas Mekayma? Hashem understands its path and knows its place. Yodei HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Yisrael she'einu michon lekabel gezeirus achzor Edom. It means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu understood that Bnei Yisrael cannot withstand the cruelty and the assaults of Edom being Rome. Lefikach higlo esam leBavel. Therefore Hashem exiled them to Bavel, that there's a contingent in Bavel as well, so that they can handle it. V'amar Rabbi Lazar lehigla HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Yisrael leBavel, and Rabbi Lazar says that Hashem sent the exile into Babylon, into Bavel, el bnei shamuka kashol. The reason is because not just because they couldn't withstand Rome, but also because of the depth of Bavel. It's like the Shaol. Shenema, it says mi'at Shaol efdei mimoves egolim, that I will redeem them from Shaol, and from death I will redeem them. Rabbi Chanina Amar, a third reason why there was an exile to Bavel, because their language is close to the language of Torah, and it allows Bnei Yisrael to maintain a connection to Torah and a teaching of Torah. In fact, we have the halachas that we get from the Babylonian Talmud, from the Gemara of Bavel, and the yeshivas Agonim continued up until the 10th century to be the prominent place of the source of Torah throughout the early part of this Golus. Rabbi Yochanan said because it's just going back to the roots, to its mother's place. That a couple that's fighting, the woman will then be sent home back to her mother's house. So to over here, Bnei Yisrael, Hashem sent us out. We are like the wife of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we saw in the pasuk of Hosea, and so Hashem sends us back to our roots, original place, restart. Like Rabbi Alexandri said, that there are three that were back to the roots, to where they were planted. Velein Yisrael, Kesef Mitzrayim, the money of Egypt, the Ksav Luchas Yisrael, and the writing on the tablets that Moshe brought down. So the pasuk says the Ksav Luchas Yisrael. What is Yisrael? Hadabra. What we already saw, this teaching, that Bnei Yisrael went back to Bavel, which is the place of the ancestors. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov came. Avram came from there. The Amos came from there. Kesef Mitzrayim, the money of Egypt. What's that? For it says, "Vayihi b'shana chamishis lemelech Rechavam ola Sheshach melech Mitzrayim al Yishalayim." As it says, on the 5th year of Rechavam, the king, Sheshach, the king of Yerushalayim, came and he pillaged and took so much of the wealth of the Beis Hamikdash and of Bnei Yisrael back to Egypt. And this was what Bnei Yisrael took when they left Egypt. So that went back to where it was. And the Ksav Luchas and the writing of the tablets, what's that? The Chsifra, it says, Vashabreim le'einehem, and I broke it to their eyes. So the simple meaning would mean that Moshe broke the luchos in front of Bnei Yisrael. But Tana, we learned in the Brisa, luchos nishbaru. What does it mean that it was broken to their eyes? That the tablets were broken, and the letters began to float. In other words, the teaching of the Torah itself, the soul, the space that the letters took up, that remained intact and were floating in the air, and so that's left there to be picked up. So that's l'einayim. The letters went back to where they come from. Ula Amar. Ula says the reason that Bnei Yisrael went to Galus and Bavel is Kadesh Yochlu Tamar Miyaska Torah, so that they have the ability to study Torah by getting sustenance and nourishment from dates. Dates being something that can give a lot of sustenance and fill you without much, for pretty inexpensive, and that would allow for someone to have the ability to study Torah. Now, Gemara relates a story with Ula himself when he came to Pumbedisa for the first time, or for the first time he had this opportunity to have dates. So Ula Ikla Pumbedisa Krivale Tirna that Tamri brought him a basket full of dates. Now he looked at that and was like, "Oh my goodness, that's a lot of dates." Amalu Kama Kihani Bezuza. How much can you get of this? Thinking, how much of a basket can you get for one zuz? And they said, actually, it's more than one basket. You could get 3 baskets with the zuz. So he said, wow, you can get a basket full of honey, bezuzah, for just a zuz, right? And it's meaning that it's so simple, it's so cheap to get sustenance. And the Babylonians are not studying even more Torah than they already are. I mean, it's so cheap, you don't have to work. All you need is a little bit of money to get some dates and you're fine. However, but he filled himself with dates without a balance there, and it served as a laxative. So Belayla, that night, it caused him a lot of pain and difficulty. Amar, he said, "Merlotzina sama de Musa," a basket full of death potion. Bezuzah. You buy that with a zuz ubavlai ask Torah. Wow, they still study Torah even though that they have this death potion. In other words, it felt so painful and difficult that he now appreciated that the Babylonians were still studying Torah even though they had this food that was not all that great. In any case, but nevertheless, it did allow for the study Torah for cheap. But that's what he said is the reason that Bnei Yisrael were exiled to Bavel, so that they can have this ability to study Torah this way. Rabbi Tzvi said, "My dechsiv." What is the meaning of the pasuk? It says in Yeshayahu, "V'alchu amim rabim va'amru l'chu v'nala el har Hashem el beis Elokei Yaakov." Many nations will come and join Yisrael, and they will say, "Let us go up to the mountain of Hashem." To the house of the God of Yaakov. I want to say the God of Yaakov, Elokei Yaakov. Elokei Avram v'Yitzchak. Why doesn't it mention the God of Avram and Yitzchak? Elokei Avram shekaza b'har. It's not like Avram that it was the way to serve Hashem was up at a mountain, the elevation, which is detached and difficult to climb for people. Like when he saw the mountain by the binding of Yitzchak, when he saw the mountain, he said, as it will be said today, in the mountain of Hashem, we will be seen. Not like Yitzchak, where it says Sadeh, a field. Yitzchak went out in the field to daven, and the davening in the field represents the elevation to go to Hashem, but you have to detach yourself from the field, from the home, from your living space to go out elsewhere. Ela ki Yaakov shekar abayis, or rather in the dwelling of a person in the home. You don't have to detach yourself. You don't have to go up on a mountain. You don't have to go out into the fields. In your own home, you have the ability to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what people are going to connect with and say, let us go to see the God of Yaakov, where not only will we go up to the mountain of Hashem, as they say, we will go up to the mountain of Hashem, but we will go to the house of Yaakov. This way, when they come back home in their own space, they will have the ability to serve Hashem, and that's what we're seeking, to serve Hashem in our own homes. Shenemar, as it says by Yaakov, Vayikra Shem HaMakamahu Beisel, the place that he put down the foundation stone for building his own family, he called the house of Hashem, because that's what he was building, a dwelling place, a house where within one's own family and household, that is the place for Hashem, for HaKadosh Baruch. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Gadol kibbutz golius kem shenivra b'shamayim haaretz. And the day when Hashem will gather all of Bnei Israel from the corners of the earth, where we just learned that the Bnei Israel were dispersed, that's as great as the day of creation of the heaven and earth. Shenema, for it says, V'nikbetzu Bnei Yehuda Bnei Yisrael yachdav v'samalem rosh echad, the family, the household of Yehuda, the kingdom of Yehuda, and the kingdom of Yisrael, the Bnei Yisrael, will all join together, and they will place themselves one leader. V'alu min haaretz, and they'll come up from the lands where they are, ki gadol yom Yisrael, because the day where the planting of Hashem will finally be gathered is so great. It says yom echad, and it says that day is like the first day of creation. In other words, when the world comes to its fulfillment, will be the fulfillment of creation, and that is the mention of Yom, that day, Vayerev Vayiboker. Like the day of creation. Yasem sheshachtu olav apetropsis. So the Mishnah mentioned not only a woman who, or both her husband and her father, counted her in the Korban Pesach, but also a Yasem, an orphan that had been two apetropsin, two custodians who take care of the Yasem, that he too, this Yasem can join whichever one they want. So the pasuk says, so the Gemara says, so this Yasem can join whichever korban he wants. So Shemas Mino, we hear from this that Yesh Bereira, that there is a concept of Bereira, there is the concept of, Shemas Mino, we hear from this Yesh Bereira, that you can later define something retroactively that you're doing. And this is the concept of Bereira we find very often in Shas, the idea that you can do an action now and later on define the action that you did beforehand, what it is. So over here, the apotropis, both apotropis are bringing a korban, and later this Yasem, this orphan child, is going to define the action that was done previously, which one of them was the one for them. So, and since this is a question, is it true that our Mishnah is following that opinion of Yesh Breira? Amar Rabbi Zera, no, Selabayis Mikol Makun. The reason is, over here it's a different idea. That it says Ish Selabayis Ava Selabayis. It says each person lamb to their household, and so therefore labayis means that the head of the household can bring it for the members of the household without their knowledge, and therefore it's not that later retroactively he's going to define what the Korban Pesach was at the time that he brought it, but rather the moment that he brings it, since he is the custodian, he is the head of the household. So the head of the household can bring it for the members of the household, even without their knowledge, even without their acceptance or intent. And so it's not later retroactively redefining the moment, but rather it's at the moment itself of the shechita that the right is there even without the knowledge of the orphan. So indeed, the Brisa says that from this pasuk sela bayis, a lamb to the household, we see that a person can bring a korban pesach if he's the head of the household for his young children if they are under bar bas mitzvah. While the avnei b'shem chasai kananim, and for the Canaanite or the servants and maidservants that were born not Jewish, that in their process of servitude converted to Judaism in this in between state of partially Jewish. This is the state of the Eved Canaanite, and so they too participate in the korban pesach, but are a part of the household where the head of the household is going to bring it for them without asking their intent. That's just as a part of the household. The minors and the servants are going to be included, whether they were asked or not. At this point, that's what the Gemara assumes it means. But not, he cannot bring a korban pesach for his adult children, and that means over by b'nei mitzvah, bar bas mitzvah, and not from the Jewish-born servants, va'al yad ishtoi, and also not on behalf of his wife, unless it's with their intent. So the first brisa says that that there is no intent needed for the minors and the servants, and there is intent needed for his wife and adult children. I didn't get that, John. What was the question?
So if an Eved who is not Jewish can eat the korban pesach, so why is it that regular Israelim can't eat, truma and stuff like that? If it's okay for somebody to eat something that's above their pay grade, it seems like, that should be okay.
Yeah. The korban actually, so that's why I said an Eved actually does have to go through a gerus, right? It is in a partial. It's an interesting state, but it's a partial Am Yisrael. They're obligated in mitzvahs, and they go to the mikvah as a part of the avnus. And in fact, and the Allah is in the Rambam Paskas this way that if an Eved within their first year don't go through that process of conversion, they actually automatically are not an Eved anymore, because they have to go through this gerus, and then they become a part of the family, and they eat. As a part of the family that they're in, they can eat korban pesach. And in fact, if they are in the family of a kohen, then they would eat korban. Then they would eat teruma as well. So an Eved and a shivcha really become a part of that household, and in their conversion. But it's a partial conversion once they complete the conversion, meaning they are, as we'll see soon, they come out of servitude, then they actually become a regular convert Jew.
So is that the distinction then, that they can actually become, they're able to get into that final state, whereas we can't? If you're not a Kohen, you're just not a Kohen ever?
Right, but they're in this partial place, so they're in that family.
Okay.
Whichever family they're in, whatever household they're in, they get the status of that family, of that household. So you have an Eved that's eating teruma, because that he's in the Kohen's household, and a born Yisrael or a regular ger, not. In any case, so as far as the korban pesach goes, for his adult children and his wife, it would have to be that he does so midatan with their knowledge. Tanya idach, we have another brisa that says it this way: one shall not shech the korban pesach for his adult children, for his Jewish-born servants, and for his wife, unless he gets their acknowledgement, their das, their intent. But for his minor children and for his Canaanite-born servants, regardless whether he got their acknowledgement or not. And then it says, "V'kulan sheshachtu v'shachat rabban alein yotze b'shel rabban v'yotze b'shel atzman." And all of them, if they did it for themselves, it would, and the head of the household did it, they're going to have to follow the head of the household and not themselves. Chutz min ha'isha, besides for a woman, she'echayla limchas, because she could say, "No, I don't want to. I made it for myself." Now, the Gemara says, "Wait, why'd you say only this only is only true for a woman? What about the adult children? Adult children also, if they made it for themselves, you just said before that you can only the head of the household can only bring it for the head of for the adult children with their knowledge, and if they did it for themselves, why do they have to join with the head of the household?" So Amar Rava, so Rava said, "Isha v'chol damila." You're right. It didn't mean just a woman. It meant the adult children and the Jewish-born servants as well. So Gemara says Hagufa Kashas, but the Bryce itself seems contradictory. Amris chutz mina isha sheichal limchas. At the end, you say a woman can do macha'a. She can renounce what the head of the household is doing for her. Time of the machi, meaning it's because she expressly says she doesn't want to join with the head of the household, right? With her husband, or the husband's father, whatever it may be. But if not for that, she would be automatically joined in with the family. Vaktani Resha. But before that, it says that he can't bring it unless he asks her. So it says that you can only bring it for your wife if you get her acknowledgement, if she knows about it. But if not for that, if it was just by default, it would not be valid. So the Gemara says, "My elamadaita." What does it mean that only with their understanding and knowledge? Lavda amri in. You don't have to get them to acquiesce and say, "Yes, I want to join your Karban Pesach." Elamastama. That is the default. The understanding is that when someone brings a Karban Pesach for the family, then everybody really wants it, even a wife, for sure, the adult children and the servants, etc. However, Elabastama lafuki elabastama, when it says without expressly saying it, but the idea is if she or the adult children expressly say, "I'm not joining your Karban Pesach," that's where the head of the household cannot bring it for them. Whereas for the minor children, even if the 10-year-old says, "I'm not, joining your Karban Pesach, I'm going to my friend," the parent can bring it for them. Well, it says that in all of these, if the head of the household brought it for them, and they brought it for themselves, they followed the head of the household. Where there was no one expressly saying that they don't want it. So why does it count as that they are excluding themselves? It says a woman excludes herself because she can renounce the head of the household. The Gemara says, of course, Rava said the very fact that she's bringing her own Karban Pesach there's no greater statement of "I'm not joining your Pesach" than a woman going ahead and bringing her own. If the adult children or the wife, anybody that brings a Karban Pesach for themselves, there is no greater form of saying, "I'm not joining you," and that's the case where for the adult children and for the woman, it would count as a macha, as saying, "I don't want to join your Karban Pesach." However, by default, if there's no statement, they don't bring their own Karban Pesach, and they don't make a statement, the assumption is that that's going to be valid with minor children, even if they try and bring their own Karban Pesach, and even if they say, "I don't want to join," that they are by default joined. The the Mishnah further said that if there's a Eved Kanani, a non-Jewish born servant, where he has two partners, where he's 1 week in one place, 1 week working for the other, or one day, however they work it out, and now he can join in the Korban Pesach for either one of them, and they both bring a Korban Pesach for him. So in our Mishnah, it said that the Eved cannot eat in either of the homes, and as we're going to ask in the Brisa, it says that he can eat in either of the homes. Now, which one is it? Rami later of Ina Saba Rav Nachman. So Ravina Saba asked Rav Nachman. Tanan, in our Mishnah, it says Eved shel shnei shut v'lo yacham shel shneim. You cannot eat from either of them. V'atanya, but we have a brisa that says Ratzim Mize'ochel, that if he wants, he can eat from this family, and if he wants, he can join that family. So in our Mishnah, it says he cannot join either, and in the brisa, it says he can join wherever he wants. He's free to choose wherever he wants to go. So he said to him, Eina Saba, Eina the elder. And some say that he called him blackened pot. And it was a euphemism for somebody who studied Torah so much that they neglected to fully take care of their body on account of how much they toiled in Torah. So either way, he said to him, between the two of us, we'll be able to figure this out. This time Shmaitza will be able to understand the teaching. The Mishnah is talking about where each one of the owners that brought the Korban Pesach say, oh, I want you specifically at my Seder. I want you to join our Korban Pesach. And so I don't want you going to the other. And so being that he is in servitude to that person, he cannot join the other. And each one is saying that about the other. So now he's in limbo. He can't go to either. The Brisa is talking about that they don't care. They say, go ahead, either come to mine, go to his. And so even though that in the intent was that he would be in my Korban Pesach when I brought it, and the same goes for the other fellow, but right now that leaves the Eved with a choice wherever he wants. And even though that, again, that would seem like Brera, as we saw the same explanation that we saw by an orphan, where since the Torah says Selabayis, that the household has a lamb. So if he's in the household, the original intent from the start, it's not that later retroactively he's defining the intent. At the moment of Shechita, the intent is already there. However, in a case where, like the previous case, there were partners for the servant, and then one of them emancipated him. So now he's part independent, free, complete convert Jew. And in part, he's still in servitude to this other Jew. So he cannot join in the family of the Adon, of the master, because he's partially an independent Jew, and so he can't just join in there. So meaning he can't eat as a part of the household of the Adon because he's independent, partially an independent converted Jew. But he can eat his own Korban Pesach, even though that there's a part of him that's a part of the other family. But we learned that he cannot eat for himself of his own or of his master, so he's really in limbo. So the Gemara says actually there was a first teaching and a later retraction by Beis Hillel and a newer teaching. The Tanan, as we learned. Somebody's in this limbo state where he was partially emancipated, but not fully. So he's half complete Yisrael, and half not. So what's the halacha? Beis Hillel saying that one day he's independent to work for himself, and the next day he has to work as a servant for the family, and back and forth every single day. You switch off, maybe they'll do weeks, but the idea is that he's in part free man and a complete Jew, and a part not. Whereas Beishamai challenged basically to say that's all nice and dandy. And now we go to Pechesam base at the top. That Tekantem is Rabbi. That works out well for the master. But for himself, he's still in a state of limbo, and you've done nothing for him. Lisa Shifcha Einiyach. How is he supposed to marry? He can't marry a Shifcha because he's still partially because he's already partially emancipated. Lisa Bascharin Einiyach, but he can't marry a complete Jew. Shadai Chesievet because he's still partially in servitude. Yivatel, so he's just going to remain in this limbo state. And the perpetuation of the world, the structure of the world that Hashem built is that it can only continue with period of Rivia, can only have the inhabitants with fruitful and being multiplying and being fruitful, as it says, and so it's a requirement, and you're removing him from his mitzvah, either that or the obligations, or just the fulfillment of the purpose. Either way, whether it's unclear whether it's a mitzvah or not. Ella mipnei tikkun ha'olam, but rather in order to keep the world fixed or to fix the world, we force him to emancipate this person completely. And if he says, wait, but he owes me the work, so he's going to write a document that he will owe him the work, but as a free and independent person, and then he becomes a Yisrael. And so that was accepted by Beis Shammai. That was the ruling of Beis Shammai and accepted by Beis Hillel. So that's the Mishnah Acharayna, and therefore, indeed, over here as well, he's going to be forced to allow him to make his own Korban Pesach, and that's what he's going to be. He can't eat from either. He's going to end up needing to eat his own from his own Korban Pesach. So now the next part of the Mishnah is not going to go on whose Korban Pesach to join, but rather what type of Korban Pesach. If somebody brought a lamb in place of a goat, or a goat in place of a lamb, or if there was no specific instructions, does it count as valid? So somebody said to his servant, say Pesach, go ahead and bring a Korban Pesach for me. I'm making you my proxy. You're doing it on my behalf. Go ahead and bring a Korban Pesach. Regardless of whether the family usually has lamb or usually has goat, whatever the Eved brought is going to be valid, even if it's not the typical, because he didn't specify. He just said bring a Korban Pesach, so it's going to be okay. Shochat gedi utle. Now, if this servant didn't know which one is Mishaleach, who is the one who sent him, is going to want, so he says, you know what? I'm going to bring two. I'm going to bring a goat and a lamb, and whichever one they want, they're going to eat. Yochum and Arishan. So they should eat whichever one was first, because the first one was effective and the second one is already for naught. Shochach ma'amalei Rabbi. But if there was a specific instruction, the Adon says to him, I want you to bring and he doesn't remember. Did he say goat? Did he say lamb? Ketzad Yaseh. So what does he do? He can't bring the wrong one, because then he'll be messing up the shlichus, the proxy, right? He's working on behalf of someone else, and if he does something wrong, it's not going to count. On the other hand, if he only brings one, it may be wrong. If he brings two, that may not be right either. So Ketzad Yasa, what should he do? Yishchat le ugedi. He should shech both a lamb and a goat. V'yomar, and he'll make a condition. He'll make it conditional and say it this way. Im gedi amar li Rabbi. If my master told me to bring a goat, gedi shaloi. So this goat that I'm bringing is his. V'taleh shali, and the lamb is mine, my Korban Pesach. Vim Tleh Amar Li, and if he said to me that it should be a lamb, Amar Li Rabbi, so then Hatleh Shalei, so the lamb is his, Begadi Shalei, and the goat is mine. The Gemara is going to ask later, where does he have the funds for this? It would say it comes from the master itself because he wants it to work, the Korban Pesach to work. Shachach Rabbi Ma'amalei. Now he did that, and then he comes back home and he says, okay, I wasn't sure whether you told me lamb or goat, and so I did both, and I made it conditional. So which one did you tell me? And he says, actually, I don't remember. I don't remember if I told you lamb or goat. So Shneim Yetzel Beis HaSreifa. Neither of them can eat their Korban Pesach because the each one were on a different group, and so the Eved can't eat from the families, and the family can't eat from the Eveds because, after all, they were in separate groups, and we know that you can only in Nechel and Menuyav, it can only be eaten by those designated with it. So each one is not going to count as a valid korban. It counts as a valid korban, but neither of them can eat it. Sorry, I'm not sure where that sounds from. So the lamb can't be eaten because maybe that's by the family, because maybe that's the Eveds, and the goat can't be eaten by the family because maybe that's the Eveds. But the korban is valid because each one had a group that it was meant for, and as the Gemara is going to say, Klape Shmaya in Shemaim they know which one belongs to which one, so the korban is a valid korban. It's just that neither of them can eat it because neither of them can tell which one is theirs, and so that it'll end up being burnt. And it's a valid Korban Pesach enough because at the time of shechting, it was valid, and therefore it's going to count as a valid Korban Pesach for each one. The Gemara says, Pshita, this would be an obvious case. Shochat Gedi Yochel, Afagav the Ragab Tle. He brought a goat, even though they usually have lamb, it's going to be valid. Shochat Le Yochel Afagav the Ragab Gedi. He shechted a lamb, then they eat it, even though usually they have a goat. However, Shochat Gedi Utle, he brought both a lamb and a goat. Yochel min Arisha. This that it says that he will eat from whichever one was brought first. But over here, he's designated on 2 Korban Pesachs. So that should be invalid on account of that. Now there are 2 Korban Pesachs for one group of people. So Gemara says, Masnisa and Memelech HaMalka. The Mishras talk about a king and queen. And not specifically king and queen, at least in Rashi. And Tosfos Pshat, it would be anybody that's in this state of mind, like a king and queen, where to them, it doesn't make a difference whether they eat lamb, eat goat. They're the type of people that don't make their own menu. They just come to dinner and someone has made their menu for them and serve them. And so therefore, whatever is being served, they eat. And so when the intent, whatever he brought first, whatever shechted first, is a valid korban. Batanya, and indeed we learned, you cannot be counted in 2 korban pesachs at once. However, there was a scenario, an instance where a king and queen, they told their servants, go bring a korban pesach for us. And they went and they brought 2 korban pesachs. And they asked the king, he said, I don't know which one we want. Go ask the queen. And the queen said, I said, I don't know either. Whichever is one is good for us. We usually don't make our menu. We just come to the table and dinner is set. Go ask Rav Gamliel. So they went and they asked Rav Gamliel. He said, Malka umelach daiten kala alein. The king and queen, their mind, their intent is light upon them, meaning that they're ambiguous in this. There is no specific intent as to which one it shall be. So Yochel min Arishon, so they can eat whichever one it is, whichever one is first. Anan, whereas he says I, Rabbi Gamliel, and just by the Yavitz points out that this must be the earlier Rabbi Gamliel who Rabbi Gamliel Azakin, who was at the time when there would still be kings and queens. This probably either has Manian queens, or it's a king and queen, or it's the king and queen of Chadieb, Adabin. So in any case, so Rabbi Gamliel made a distinction about myself, where I do know and ask for a specific thing. I can't. Both of them are going to be invalid for me because I cannot retroactively designate which one was mine, and I do have a specific one that I would have chosen, and so that it would be invalid. So our Mishnah would have to be in such a state of mind where the person doesn't choose their own food and they're okay with coming and whatever is served is served. The Gemara tells another story similar of the king and queen, where there was a rodent that was found in the kitchen, and they want to know whether everything is assumed tamei or not, and they assumed that it was dead. Bikshul the tamei kol asuda. They want to say everything was tamei. Bo v'shalas hamelech. They asked the king. Amalem lechu v'shalas hamalka. Go ask the queen. She is the scholar, and that's what indicates to me that it was the queen of Chadieb, who was Helena. She was very wise and learned, as Rashi points out here. So he said, go ask the queen. She knows. Bo v'shalas hamalka. And they went and asked the queen. Amar lehem lechu v'shalas Rabbi Gamliel. So go and ask Rabbi Gamliel. He can tell you. Shuba'u v'shalos. They came and asked Rabbi Gamliel. Amar lehem beismet b'chaim reseach. He said, nah, the kitchen is very hot. Or was it a cold kitchen? Amar lehem reseach. No, it was very hot. They were cooking all day. Amar lehem lechu v'tila le'kushel tzaynin. Go over to the rodent and pour some cold water in it. Halchu v'tila le'kushel tzaynin. They poured cold water in it. And it scattered and it scurried away. But here Rabbi Gamliel says, up. You see that it's still alive, and he said everything was tahor. Nimtza melech tole b'malka. The king was dependent on the queen's knowledge and understanding. But nimtza malka tului ber Gamliel, and the queen was dependent on the knowledge and understanding of Rabbi Gamliel. Nimtza kalasuda tului ber Gamliel. The entire meal was dependent on Rabbi Gamliel. Shachach masham alei Rabbi. In the case where he forgot what the owner had told him, so how can he bring a korban pesach? So he's going to bring one of a goat, one of a lamb, and he's going to make a condition. Whichever one is the owner wants is his, and the other one's mine. Shali mashakan avikana Rabbi. But where does he have his own funds? This belongs to the master itself. What he does is he goes to the shepherd or to the salesperson that haragil Rabbi Etzli, where his owner usually buys his meat. The the Rabbi and wants the owner to be successful in his korban pesach. And it says, give me one for the family and give me one for myself. And give it to me with the condition that I purchase it for myself and not for my master. In this way, he has a korban pesach for himself, independent and separate from the adon, the master itself.